Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name's Joyce Dalgleish, and if you don't know me, I'm part of the data division in Scottish Government. And I have my sort of work role and I suppose my professional interest is all around change and innovation in the public sector. And this event that you're attending today is done in collaboration between Scottish Government's data division and the Data Lab community. So we are hosted, we've got our host with the most here, Stephen, who's looking after all the technical side. When we come to the end and tell you about where all the materials for this are going to be saved, we'll be pointing you to Data Lab resources. So I'll tell you a little bit about the community. I won't take up too much time, but just a little bit of scene setting. So the Data Lab community offers lots and lots of sort of spaces for people with an interest in data, one of which is the public sector. And there's a large public sector community, and it's been growing in strength over the last year or two in particular. And one of the things we do as part of that is to host these sessions. And I just want to say why we do that. So the community and having these sessions is a chance to sort of showcase what goes on in the public sector. I think many people maybe don't have an appreciation of the kind of really interesting work and the interesting problems that we get to work on in the public sector and how technology is being used. For those of you on this call, and I recognise some names here that you're working in the public sector already, then there'll be a sense of maybe somebody's doing something interesting that sparks an idea in you. Maybe you are going to hear about something that you weren't aware of that can help you in your job role or maybe help one of your colleagues. But also by making this a public sector space, I think there's something about being empathetic to the challenges of the public sector and the systems that we operate within. For my own sins, I work in Scottish Government now, obviously, but most of my working career has been in the NHS. And there's sorts of unique challenges that come with public sector data. So there's something there about you're in a place of understanding. If you work in the public sector and if you want to know more about it, it's a good place to do that. So a little bit of housekeeping. So this event is being recorded, so the cameras and microphones will be switched off. It'll be recorded, so that'll be available through the YouTube channel. So that will be available to you after the event, and you'll get the links and email communications. There's a chat function, and I see some of you are using that already. So you can add your questions in the chat as you listen. Now, it could be that the idea comes to you as you're listening and you want to capture it, so put it in there and we'll come to it as we go. But maybe if it's a more technical thing, then we can answer it in train. And we'll take as many questions as we can during the time we have, and for some of you it might be a case of following up afterwards. As I say, we'll put everything, any slides that are shared or any links that come up onto the public sector community, which if you're not a member of and you've just found us through the events page, then absolutely, I'd love you to sign up and join us. So moving on. So today I'm going to be introducing Lee Dunn, a speaker from the Scottish Digital Academy. And why I was really keen to do this was for two reasons. Reason number one, learning and skills development is the theme for the Data Lab this month, and there's lots of events going on which you'll be able to find out about. And two, I think in my work, when I go and work across different people in the public sector, I'm still struck by the amount of people who maybe aren't aware of the Digital Academy and aren't aware of all the fantastic resources that they offer and courses that are available to us. So I think I'm sure lots of you on the call will know, but maybe others don't. So I thought this was a really brilliant thing to showcase because it's such a fantastic resource for the public sector. So I'd like to stop sharing my presentation now and hand over to Lee, who's going to talk about the Digital Academy. Lee, are you okay to come on now?
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Joyce, and thank you all for coming along to hear me speak today. It's a pleasure to be here. I will try and work the laptop magic and present my slides to you. Just thinking about it, hopefully that's now appeared for you all. So first and foremost, I guess, what I would be really interested in of the audience that's here today, how many of you have heard of the Digital Academy, and if you know what we actually do, and I'll cover a little bit of that off in the presentation. It'd be really helpful just in the chat if you could just say yes or no. Do you know who we are and what we're doing? If you could do that, that would be helpful and give me a bit of a stay. So I'm seeing quite a few yeses, a few nos, which is fine. Okay, so it is pretty mixed, which is what I expected, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, let's jump into it. We will leave some time towards the end of the session today as well. You can ask questions, or if there's anything that you want to pick up and comment on, then feel free to put that into the chat, or at the end there will be an opportunity if you wish to come on and ask questions. Then Stephen will help facilitate that, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go along. Right, I'm going to advance my slides on. So let me start by explaining who we are, what we do, and we'll jump into digital skills from there. So the Digital Academy is part of the Digital Directorate in the Scottish Government, and we have a broad range of functions that we carry out both internally in Scottish Government and also externally across public and third sector. The third sector is equally important as the public sector part. We do both of those things. So we describe ourselves as being the Centre of Excellence for Digital Capability, which sounds quite grand, but what does that actually mean in reality? So there are three things that we sort of group together. We support, we manage, and we develop. So what does that mean? In terms of supporting, we look at the wider technology learning ecosystem, and we try to set the standard for digital skills learning. We are increasingly now active in supporting the deployment of common digital solutions that are being deployed by Scottish Government. So that would be licensing platforms, architecture, cloud platform, and so on. And we not only create the environment to develop skills to build those components, but we also provide the skill set to deploy them with organizations, and that's crucial. So that's something which is relatively new to us, but is becoming an increasing focus. We also have a responsibility for managing the government's digital and data profession. So for some of you, you might be familiar with DDAT, or Digital Data and Technology. We now refer to Government Digital and Data. There was a rebranding by the UK government last year, and we're now following suit. And we work across professions as well, so we do quite a lot with stats and analytical services as well. Within our own profession, we have 8 job families. You'll see them listed there on the screen, all the way from architecture through data, IT ops, product and delivery, quality assurance and testing, software development, UCD and user-centered design, and cybersecurity and resilience. So we do all of that. We have about 1,500 professionals in Scottish Government, but we don't just focus on that. We also focus on those who are not in the government's digital and data profession, so basically anybody. And that's where the develop part comes in. So we have 3 audiences, if you like: those that are in the profession, upskilling and reskilling, but also we want to focus on the wider civil servants that operate within core Scottish Government, but also across agencies, and of course, as I mentioned earlier on, around Scottish public and third sector as well. So that's where we operate. In terms of digital strategy for Scotland and what that looks like, so I can't really talk about the development of digital skills and all the work that we are doing and the work that we want to do in the future without referencing these documents. If you've not yet seen them, then please do go away and Google them. I will provide some links as well, which can be shared alongside these slides. The strategy is new in that the way that it's being developed is an umbrella strategy. So there's a vision statement, and then beneath the vision statement, there will be several delivery plans. So it's a more federated approach. So the first delivery plan is the Sustainable Digital Public Services Delivery Plan, and within that, it sets out a range of different things that we want to try and achieve and we want to try and do over the duration of the next year, broadly to 2028, and capability and digital skills is a big part of that. So everything that we're developing and the work that we're doing sits beneath that particular strategy. To support that, we have a National Digital Capability Advisory Group, which is made up of a whole range of different organisations and representative voices, and that group is a reciprocal group. So what does that mean? It means that the group feeds into the delivery of the strategy, so the work that we need to do. So how can we take the strategy and develop specific actions that are tangible that we can take forward within the next 12 months so that we can actually see that we're making progress. But the reciprocal part of that is if there's a barrier or if there's something significant that needs to change, that could be legislation, it could be funding or anything else in between, then we feed that back up through our routes of governance and ultimately back to ministers. So that's the work of the advisory group. So some of the things that I'm going to talk about today has came from the advisory group, but some of it has also came from wider engagement of the development of the digital strategy and the delivery plan. So we have an evidence base which suggests this is where we need to take the wider system forward across public sector to develop skills and capability as we move forward. There are 4 key deliverables for the academy. You'll see them here on the screen. The one that I'll talk to today is workstream 3, which is digital strategy. So just to make you aware that there is a wider kind of piece of work which is ongoing. These things are all integrated together, so they're not completely separate. But for the purposes of our conversation today, we'll just focus on that strategy piece. But again, towards the end, I'm happy to take any questions. So let's dig into that in a bit more detail. So what does this actually mean? What are the kind of things that we're doing to develop digital skills? So this is more about the conditions and nurturing the ability to develop digital skills, not necessarily just the actual skill itself. So the difference between aptitude and that sort of innovative space and the thirst to create learning opportunities, as well as the actual courses and the programs that people perhaps want to attend. I think these two things are not completely separate and actually need to be looked at holistically. So we will be pushing on open education resources. Now that's not new. And for many of you that have been working in the learning space will know that that's been around for quite some time now, but I don't think we do a particularly good job of that in the public sector. So I'll give you an example. Within the Digital Academy, we have created 40 media clips, roughly 2 to 5 minutes long, of different digital data and technology professions who are talking about their work and how they have to develop agile mindsets and so on and so on. We have those for our courses and we've deployed those internally in our ecosystem in Scottish Government. And we've spent money doing that, but it makes perfect sense actually to make that available to everybody else. So other organisations can take those 40 media clips and you can deploy them into your own environments or do whatever else you want to do with those. And it goes beyond media clips. You know, it could apply to resources. It could be course structures, it could be course content, it could be worksheets, everything else in between. So whenever we are developing things, we want to make that available. We want to make that free to use for the rest of the public sector. But crucially, we also want the rest of the public sector to do the same. So we're trying to develop a critical mass. So if you look at NHS, for example, local governments who co-chair the National Digital Capability Advisory Group with me, we want to create that critical mass where we're all developing materials and making them available, and then we sort of build that out from there. Now, this has not happened yet. This is a piece of work that we're taking forward this year, and of course, we're only in January. So I would expect that certainly by Easter time and towards the summer, you'll start to see more coming out from that particular piece of work. The National Model of Professional Learning. So we need to make sure that any suppliers or learning providers that are operating within our ecosystem are doing so in a way that's meaningful and purposeful. So I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that. So if we have a piece of procurement activity and we want to bring in a supplier, we want to make sure that that supplier is talking to Scottish Government policy context, they're talking to the context in which we operate in public sector in Scotland. We want to make sure they're referring to things like the Scottish approach to service design, that they're referring to the Digital Scotland Service Standard, and so on and so on and so on. Not only that, but we also want to make sure that organisations have the capability and the capacity to deliver professional learning. So, for example, an organisation wants to deliver to 5,000 people and they've got 2 members of staff. Okay, that might be doable, but if they've got 20 members of staff, then more likely doable. So it's trying to weigh all of that up. So the model of professional learning will set out that scene. It's not an endorsement, it's an indicator of quality that will also have a range of resources wrapped around it, which talks about what does good professional learning look like. And again, for many organizations, they will already be working towards that standard, but there will be quite a few that are not. So it's trying to create that basic or baseline of how people are going about learning. The Digital Capability Assessment Toolkit. So this is a readiness for transformation. So when an organization is about to signal that it's going to spend money on a transformation program, we need to make sure they've got the right people with the right skills at the right time. And sometimes that happens, but not always. So that's an increasing focus for government to make sure that that happens, because if we have the right people with the right skills at the right time, then this success is going to increase in terms of deliverables around that particular program of work. So that will be tied into a new portfolio management office, which sits within the Scottish Government's Digital Directorate. There's a threshold of about £5 million on that at the moment. So an organisation that's spending more than 5 million will be centrally coordinated through that particular portfolio office. And what we would then seek to do is to make sure they have the right people at the right time. But the toolkit will be a collection of resources that helps individuals, teams and organisations understand where their areas of strength are and where their areas of weakness are. So that's something that we'll be looking at developing over the course of the year. Data and data stewardship. Increasingly important, and data is drawn out specifically within the strategy document and the Digital Public Services Delivery Plan. That's something that we'll continue to put the foot on the gas with, because we all know that data is crucial to pretty much everything that we do. There is a difference, of course, between somebody who has some data literacy versus somebody who is using data for software engineering or for other kinds of very specific role types. But we also need to look at that data stewardship piece as well, especially when we're looking at national data exchanges and so on and so on. And some of that we do as a unit or a piece of work within the Digital Academy, but we work really closely with our data colleagues as well in data division, and of course with other providers who are in that ecosystem, like the Data Lab, for example. And that's why I'm on this call today, because we work together within that ecosystem. Leadership perspectives and transformation perspectives. I'm going to touch upon these in a little bit more detail in a moment or two. We are developing a pilot at the moment with the University of St Andrews on micro-credentials around data and AI. So I think the timeline for this is broadly the summer. I'll use the word civil service summer, which we all know could be anywhere between sort of June and September sort of time. So what we will be looking at is 5 to 10 credits for a credits-bearing course that will be stackable. So we'll make those available. I think the pilot will include about 300, so we don't know the exact audience for that yet. It's likely to be government and also parts of the public sector. We don't know if it's going to be an open call or whether we'll target. That's yet to be determined, but it is a pilot. But we'll be funding that piece of work, working in collaboration with the University of St Andrews and developing micro-credential opportunities. The stackable component, of course, of that is you could do 10 credits here and another 10 there and another 10, and ultimately build that towards a postgraduate certificate or a diploma and so on. And because it is a pilot, if we manage to succeed with that and we'll measure the impact of that particular intervention, then it means that we'll try and replicate that with other universities and potentially colleges as well, and bringing colleges into that. There is a skills survey which is due to be sent out across Scottish Government and parts of the public sector to try and understand where areas of strength and areas of development sit in terms of digital skills and gaps. There are some gaps, but some of those gaps we know will stay as gaps. So I'll give you an example around penetration testing. So with the Scottish Government, for example, we don't have a lot of people who do penetration testing, but that is a gap which is understandable to us because we outsource a lot of our penetration testing to specialist organisations. So we don't need a lot of people in government to have those particular skills, but we need to understand where other deficits perhaps sit around agile or business management or whatever the particular skill set might be. That will be tied into a wider piece of work around procurement 2028. So if somebody was to come to me at the moment and say, okay, Lee, how much is the public sector spending on developing digital skills? I wouldn't have an answer to that, nor if they came to me and said, what kind of digital skills are we developing? I might be able to get some anecdotal evidence or parts of evidence base for that, but I wouldn't be able to say for certain. And that's because there are lots of different routes to market and there are different means of procurement. So we'll be doing some work over the next couple of years, and we'll develop a discovery around this, which will include both public and third sector voices, but also bring in suppliers to think about what does that landscape of procurement activity look like right now, what can we do to change that, and how can we make that much more accessible for people? How can we make procurement easier and beneficial to everybody who needs to be involved? So a really crucial piece of work. So that's a broad overview of all the different things we're doing. So I'm going to dig in a little bit more about specific courses and offers and things that we have available. So I'll start with the leadership prospectus. So we have a range of leadership development opportunities. Some of those are open to anybody within the public and third sector. This is completely funded. There is no cost for you to do this other than your time and your energy. And we also have some courses which are closed at the moment. So on the screen, an example. The three open ones that you see in the blue at the top there: Digital Leadership Essentials, Agile Leadership in Practice, and Leading in a Digital World. These are all courses and programs which range from a 2.5 hour short course in Digital Leadership Essentials all the way up to a 5-day in-person program through Leading in a Digital World. And the target audience is different for each of those, but broadly talks about the principles of transformation. There's a little bit of agile that sits within that, and we also talk about all the different common digital solutions that are being developed by government and how other organizations can use some of those components. The SCS stuff that you see in the purple is new and is currently in pilot, and that digs into some of those other courses in a bit more detail. What I would expect to happen over the duration of this year and certainly into 2027 is that you'll start to see more of that becoming available. And again, these things can be accessed through the Digital Academy's website, and you can just find a course and basically sign up and join on to that. So that's the leadership prospectus. Sorry, yes, SCS, Joyce has pointed out, as Senior Civil Service. Transformation prospectus then. So this is where we have a range of courses, again, from half-day courses to 2-day courses on predominantly transformation and supporting agile practices, which is the bread and butter of the Academy. The Academy was set up in 2018 and focused primarily on these kind of courses, but it also includes other things which we'll come to in a second. So why Agile, Scrum, Kanban, Product Vision and Roadmaps, all these other ones that you see in blue over on the left-hand side, these are all courses that you can access. They're all funded by Scottish Government, so you don't have to pay for any of those things. So if you are in an organisation and you know that you're about to go through transformation, then you, yourself, other colleagues can basically come along and sign up to these. If you want a specific course which is put on, so if you have a team of 20, for example, and you want to do something around why Agile, so you're at the very early stages of this, then we can go along and we can do that specifically for your team. So you can contact us if you have a large number of people rather than individually registering on specific dates. We're always open. If you want to speak to us about any kind of courses related to transformation, if we can't do it, then we can probably point you towards somebody that can. And what we tend to do is we look holistically across the ecosystem. And if we start to see a demand where there's lots of organizations all asking for the same thing, then the government will fund that and potentially put a course in place. So it's always worth asking that question. There is a note there at the bottom. You'll see that there's a reference to Agile coffee chats and drop-in sessions. So what we've realised over the last few years, it's one thing to go along to a course and develop skills around product management or user story mapping, for example, and to do that over a course of a day or 2 days. But when you're actually in your organisation, you're trying to take that knowledge and that learning and put it into practice. That's when you start to encounter barriers or perhaps something's not quite happening the way you would expect it to. So we have these drop-in chats, which means that you can come along to a call and you can have a conversation with one of our trainers, or you can speak to an Agile coach or somebody who is practicing in government and just basically talk through your challenges, your problems, and they can give you some suggestions and some ideas. So all of that is within that transformation prospectus, excuse me. So we have all of that. Just to answer your question, Lynn, around supporting agile delivery in a waterfall governance environment, I can take quite a bit from that question. We do tend to cover that off, but it's probably more within the leadership space, if I'm perfectly honest. Though there are bits and pieces which we touched upon, in particular around the agile practitioner courses. So yes, we do increasingly do that. And just a sort of anecdote to that as well, if I take an inference from your question. So one of the things that we've been working on quite hard over the last 12 to 18 months is around governance structures and working with chief executives, senior leaders within organizations to try and show them or to demonstrate where do you want to use agile practices and what does that culture need to look like within an organization, but also perhaps where you want to use waterfall, because that's also a valid approach as well. So we bring all of those things together. The stuff that you see in purple across on the right hand side. So what happened in 2021? A couple of things happened. I came into post as head of the academy. There was a strategy refresh back in 2021 in April. We were on the back of the initial stages of the pandemic. So the initial transformation and agile focus of the academy changed, and we started to bring in other aspects of digital data and technology skill building. So around data and AI, more laterally, cyber resilience, service design, cloud, software development, engineering, and a whole range of other things that sit within that. We started to build that into the portfolio as well. So the academy doesn't just do transformation and agile, we actually do all of those other things as well. But again, it's demand focused and demand based. And there's a slight complexity to that in terms of how we progress some of that and take some of that forward, because a lot of the offer that we access might be through AWS or through Microsoft, and that can sometimes dependent on licensing and things that organizations have. So it can get a little bit complex, but broadly we do offer those things out. And where we don't have the capacity or the capability within our team to deliver that, then absolutely what we would then do is we'd then work with other organizations like the Data Lab, and we put those things into place as well. Interestingly, I've not included this on the slides, but where are we now? Losing track of my days. So this was back in November. We had a whole month of professional learning around data and artificial intelligence. So we had a whole range of suppliers. There were about 8 or 9 different suppliers and organizations from across the UK, all the way from SMEs up to larger organizations that operate globally. Data Lab was included in that as well. And we facilitated webinars. We had courses that people could attend to. There was leadership stuff. We did some stuff with the Danish government. We did stuff with Future Scotland, the Digital Scotland event. So quite often we put on these big themes of learning. So it's always, again, worth keeping an eye on their website to see what's up and coming in that particular space. And that's me. So that's a kind of broad brush overview, I guess, of the work that's being undertaken and the things that we're developing and putting forwards across the public sector over the next 12 months. I guess the last thing just to say, what I'm really interested in is something that's tangible and something that we can deliver on, because there's a lot of ambition in that, and there's a lot of things that we want to develop, but some of it will take time. But there's probably 1 or 2 things that we can do instantly and quite quickly over the next 12 months to actually try and make a difference. So that's where my head is at the moment. What can we do in 2026 that we can say we've achieved that and we've done something with that to help build digital skills and capability? Okay, I think that's me, Joyce.
Great, lovely. Thank you so much, Lee, for that. And it sounds like you're open to suggestions from people in the room as well. There's things that people, and yes, and thank you for picking up on Lynn's question. I felt like a wry smile, because I think in the public sector, most of the environment we're in is waterfall. So having to have a kind of foot in both an agile camp and a kind of waterfall managed camp, I think, is something that a lot of us have had to experience. So yes, and thank you for coming back to Lynn on that. There's a question earlier on from Jane Fowler, which I'll read out, which is, how does the digital capability assessment toolkit complement the local government digital office data or digital maturity assessments? Lots of D's there, but
good question, Jane. So there's not just the stuff at local government, there's quite a few different toolkits and quite a few things that are kicking around. We've had a look at the stuff that's happened at local government. The NHS also has a toolkit, which they call a capability framework, which is different to our professional game framework that we have within government, but that's just an issue of nomenclature. So we have that. There's also stuff through JISC, operating within colleges and universities. So there are quite a few different toolkits. I guess the key difference for the one that we're developing is that it's tied directly to the requirements of financial and portfolio management when it comes to spending public money to transform or to develop a new public service or a product. So it's tied into that particular piece of work. So it's not a generic thing, it's something that's very specific. And I guess there's a change which has happened over the last 12 months. And some people know about this and not many because it's still quite new. But we've moved from a position of the Digital Assurance Office monitoring the gateways and the work that happens through the technology assurance framework when an organisation is developing new technologies or deploying something new, versus what's happening with the new portfolio management office, because we need to try and get a better grip and understanding of what's going on and change the approach that we have within that. So the capability assessment toolkit we're developing is specific to that. That said, because we work closely with the Digital Office for Scottish Local Government, who co-chair the advisory group that I sit on, then we sort of integrate those two things together. So there will be some crossover, but it is a separate thing. You're on mute, Joyce.
Sorry, apologies. You think after 5 years we would learn, eh? So Jane's come back, as you'll see in the chat there, to say thanks. That clarification is helpful, particularly given the resource constraints in the public sector sitting alongside the drive to transform digitally, and references the Audit Scotland and Accounts Commission reports. So Lynn's come back on the digital, the Digital Assurance Office. Would it be possible to explain that change by the Digital Assurance Office? So that's the Scottish Government team, I think, a little bit, and about thresholds. I don't know if you can add a little bit more detail there, Lee.
Yeah, I can add a little bit of detail, but not a lot, if I'm perfectly honest, because it's not really my area of expertise. But the Digital Assurance Office would previously have managed the gateways and the assurance when an organisation is spending money to transform or develop a product or a service. And some of that functionality is moved out of the Digital Assurance Office into the new Portfolio Management Office, which sits within the Digital Directorate. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Some of it actually, as Jane's mentioned, to around Audit Scotland reports, the Accounts Commission, FPAC, and also Public Audit Committee, basically identified that there was a greater need to learn lessons of success and lessons of failure across public sector, where things work well and where they don't work well, to try and centrally coordinate some of the activity and to try and reduce duplication and effort. So that was a change because the Digital Assurance Office didn't do that particular function. They assured the gateway to make sure organisations were doing what they needed to do to be compliant with legislation and standards and so on and so on. So the Portfolio Management Office is a sort of step up from that. So that has brought about a change. The threshold at the moment is £5 million. So if an organisation wants to spend £5 million or more on a transformation programme, it needs to loop through the Portfolio Office. Now, there will be some exceptions around that at the moment because it's new. So it's not including everybody within public sector yet. So there are some exclusions. If anybody's interested in that and you want to drop me a message, I'm quite happy to point you towards one of my colleagues in the office and they can probably pick up more detail than what I'm able to do on this call.
Brilliant, thanks, Lee. I can pop your email into the chat, and I'm going to highlight Fee's comment here. The Digital and Data Capability Framework by NES, which I'm assuming is NHS Education for Scotland, has been adapted for local government and is part of Capabilities Toolkit. You're nodding, Lee. Is this familiar to you? Consisting of the framework, a guide, and self-assessment form that can be used by local authorities, not to confuse them both. So.
Yeah, so that's the reference I made to earlier on around the capability framework that NHS have developed, or NES.
Yeah, great. And Bob's come on from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, another health inquiry here. How do we ensure that we provide staff with skills relating to digital equity focus, specifically on ensuring technological interventions reach and benefit populations with greatest need, monitoring for algorithm bias and digital exclusion? Is that something you can pick up, Lee?
Yeah. So Aileen McLaughlin, who is responsible for digital inclusion, citizen experience, AI ethics, is leading a piece of work on that at the moment, especially because government is creating a lot of new technologies and common digital solutions. We're developing a new app that people will be able to use to access services across public sector. So we need to make sure that we are cognizant of those challenges because, as you've pointed out, Bob, it's not an equal landscape at the moment. Will it ever be an equal landscape? Probably not. So we need to continue to make sure that we are proactive in that space. At the moment, ministers and Scottish Government has no mandation of use of digital technologies. So we have to make sure that we also have the ability for people to engage in a non-technological way. What will probably happen over time is that will change, but at the moment there is no mandation to use an app or to use a particular digital service, and I think that's really important. Again, I could probably talk a bit more about that, but it's Aileen's area of work. But just to reassure you, Bob, and others, there is a particular team in Scottish Government who is looking at that.
Yeah, that's good to highlight that. And I mean, obviously, obviously my own interest in the world of data, and I've certainly seen a lot of growth of the offer within the academy on data. So it's very exciting to hear about these kind of micro credentials that are coming up. When do you think you'll be in a position to say more about those?
Yeah, so I'll be really open and honest on this call. So funding is approved. We are in the process of completing the paperwork with the University of St Andrews on that. It's not happened yet. Legal teams are looking all over that because there's a memorandum of understanding. It's a partnership between us and the university. So the university will help develop the courses. What's really important is that the courses that are being developed are very much contextualised to real world activity within the public sector. So Scottish Government and the Digital Directorate and our profession are developing case studies and resources that can feed into those courses. So it's not something which is theoretical, it's actually theory which is also applied into practice. So there's a little bit of work to do around that, which I think will probably take us up until around about Easter time. So this is phase 1. Phase 2 is then deployment of those courses. There's an academic standard component to this as well because there's a university involved. So I would suspect we're probably talking towards the tail end of this year before those courses emerge. The third phase of this, which will be really interesting, is around the scalability of that as well. So everything we're developing should be scalable and it should be accessible by other parts of the public sector. So there's a third phase which is looking at potentially scaling this up mostly within the Tay-Cities area because that's where University of St Andrews is situated, but then from there moving on to other universities and colleges and trying to think what we could do. So there's a broad kind of timeline, I guess, between now and to have those initial courses deployed versus stuff that's going to happen into 2027. And to answer Barry's question,
on you go. There's some questions come in.
Yeah, they were funded by us in the Digital Academy.
That's great. And I see Dara's got a question here in relation to that too. What metrics are going to be used to gauge success so you can develop these further with other universities?
Really good question. It just so happens that my equivalent, if you like, so my counterpart in the University of St Andrews, Vice Principal Monique McKenzie, she is a professor who specialises in stats analytics and measuring impact. So the university is also helping us, and of course they have access to PhD students as well. So part of that partnership is to try and understand the impact of the intervention as well, and to create that particular piece of work. So I don't have the answer to that yet, but it is something that we're actively focused on as well, because I think where you're probably going with this, Dara, is if we're spending money on something, if it works, great. If it doesn't, then we shouldn't do that again. So again, it's back to those lessons learned, but we need to have a really viable, robust, measurable way of understanding the impact of that intervention. So that's really important to us.
Well, it sounds, Lee, like you couldn't have actually connected with a better person on the St Andrews side to help you with that.
You'd almost think it was planned.
Almost, yeah, that sounds like you've struck really lucky. So, I mean, I know we're coming more towards the end of our time. So one of the things I maybe just wanted to ask was, because there's, as you asked earlier on, you said to people, have you heard of the Academy or not? And there was a few no's. So how would I, if I'm sitting here and it's a no from me and it's my first time, how would you suggest is the best way for me to kind of engage with the Academy and either an individual level or an organizational level?
Yeah, so the first port of call will be to visit our website. So it's digitalacademy.gov.scot. I think you'd put that into the chat actually early on. So it is there. So yeah, or Google search Scottish Digital Academy, Scottish Government, you'll find us. So have a look at our website. It tells you a little bit more about who we are and what we do. It also gives you our courses that we've got running at the moment. If there's a course where there is no date attached to it, then you can register interest on that. But from there, the next thing is probably actually just to speak to us, and we are always open to having conversations, especially at an organizational level. So if you're an organization and you know that you're about to go through transformation, or you're going through it at the moment, and you perhaps need to speak to somebody, or you need a little bit of support, even if it's just what can you do to help us, what kind of courses are available, what's coming up, we're more than happy to have those chats as well. So just drop us an email, and more than happy to have that chat with you.
That's great, because it sounds like you've got resources that are relevant to an individual wanting to learn, but also some when you're talking about the procurement and some of the other, they're sort of more like organizational level. So it looks like there's stuff there for at different levels.
Yeah, for sure. And there's something else as well. And again, this is quite new just because of where we are with the early stages of the new strategy refresh. If we can't help, then we can probably point you towards somebody who can, whether that's another part of the public sector, or it could be that, so for example, if you're developing technical architecture, we can put you in contact with Sal Lopes-Quinn, who's our chief technical architect, so we can sort of make those connections as well, even if it's not something we can directly do ourselves.
Yeah, great. That's super, Lee. And I think a bit like, I suppose that a bit like my own role, it is like, ultimately it's about helping everybody to progress, and if we can make connections and get people to somebody who might help them, that's what we're here to do. That's
yeah, absolutely,
which is great. So I'm just going to say like a few words of closing. I'll start off by saying a huge thanks to Lee for taking the time today and speaking to us, and I hope that everybody's found this interesting, and maybe some people have actually gained something. I hope you can go away and start looking at your PDP, your personal development plan, with fresh eyes, knowing that these resources are there. This session is part of a sort of a learning month that is being hosted by the Data Lab, and so I'm going to put a little plug in for the coming up event. So there's a couple there, Meetup. This is some of the events. Stephen can confirm, I think some of those have passed, but anyway, you've got other meetups. Maybe those are old dates, Stephen, but anyway, there's another meetup on geospatial coming in February. Now, I am going to share slides very briefly again, just to help, let's come back to that. Just a few things. Stephen's gone wrong dates. Oh, Stephen, do you want to put in the chat what the right dates are, and we can do a wee plug. Look, he's putting in an update now. Mind you, Stephen's saying my mistake, but my mistake for just copying and pasting what he told me and just doing as I was told. Right. So I'm going to say a little bit about the community. At the start, I said that this event has been brought to you by the sort of public sector community, which is a subset of the wider Data Lab communities. So I said on the slide we had 1,600 members, which points to the fact that I haven't updated this slide this month, and we're actually, it's over 1,700 members, which is amazing, and it is continuing to grow. So we did this last event. Last event was in November, so you see we've got another 100+ members in the last couple of months. And it's a place where we can, there we go, there's the right date's gone in now, everybody. So that online space is a place where we can connect. And if you can come into this, you could post links, you could ask for assistance, you could connect to people there. So please feel free to do that and and we can make this as active as we wish. Our next event, and sadly I don't have the link to the next event available for the very sad reason, not sad at all, that our speaker is just flown back in from Barbados, where she had spent spent New Year celebrating a big birthday. So that's a great reason not to have the event form ready for you, but just a date for your diary. It's going to be the Wednesday, 25th of February, and it's the theme for the month is marketing. And when Stephen first shared that with me, I was like, oh, I don't know if I have anything like this public sector and marketing, until I met this fantastic lady who is going to speak about the way that they've used data to make more effective the recruitment of foster carers, which is a very difficult thing to do. And they've had amazing results by actually paying attention to the data. So I think that's, if you're interested, if you're from a local authority or you're interested in fostering from professional capacity, but I think this is a really interesting story. If you have no professional interest in this area, I still think it's one to watch out for. And that is really all from me. We're just coming up to time. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to Lee for speaking, and for Stephen for keeping the doors and keeping the show on the road. And it'd be great to see you in February. But if that doesn't float your boat or you're not available, then we're going to have events all through the year. So join the community, get on the mailing list, and you'll hear everything coming up. So thank you all very much, and have a lovely rest of day. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Lee. That was super.